our next panel, the 3 o'clock UK Can Do It. So come on down to our good friends from the UK, Adrian Wootton, Helena, Mackenzie, Stewart, and Andrew. And then without further ado, I will turn it over to Mr. Adrian Wootton. Take the stage, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dale. Thank you very much for coming this afternoon. And what I'm going to do before we get to hear all the more interesting people is I'm going to rattle through this this presentation, which basically sets the context for what's going on in the film and television industries in the UK at the moment. Probably the most exciting, the busiest, most dynamic time I've known in the 30-odd years that I've been in the UK film industry, and I'm just going to set the context of sort of the why and the how. It's fair to say that what we've been doing over the last really 10 years, but it's accelerated, notwithstanding the pandemic, over the last 3 or 4 years, is to create a kind of new industrial structure for the UK film and television industry. The combination of things that have happened, the combination of things that we've done, which is a combination of private and public support, tax reliefs, has meant that we've hit this kind of huge sort of tipping point. Those figures are not fantasy, they're all true. We're now in a situation where we're generating more film and television production in the UK than ever in the history of the UK film and television industry, and probably makes us the second, equal first, most popular destination for film and television in the world. And that means we've got to do a lot of work to sustain that, a lot of work to remain competitive, a lot of work to ensure that we can carry on welcoming what's going on. And the reason that's happening is because the UK government has recognised that we make a lot of money for the UK. There's a lot of talk about what film and television does. Is it a Cinderella industry? Is it this? Is it that? Well, no, it's not. It's a business. It's a huge global business. And what we've done in the UK is basically prove to the government and prove to everybody we need to that it's an industry about jobs, about creativity, about long-term prosperity, about growing companies, about changing the face of our economy and actually changing the face of our society. And it's only because of that money that's coming in are we able to do that. We overcame the COVID pandemic by introducing protocols that meant people could go on working. Those protocols are still in operation, and it meant we carried on shooting through the whole of the, pretty much, except for 5 months, through the whole of the pandemic. And our production levels are higher than they were before the pandemic. I mentioned the growth. Well, that's the growth, and it's kind of phenomenal. It is changing the landscape. It's changing the landscape of our society, the landscape of our communities, the landscape of our infrastructure. And even in the context of all the stuff you might read about, Europe and the post-pandemic kind of EU exit, it hasn't affected our economic and creative growth as a nation for film and television. Also, what it's meant is that we've started building a lot more. It's not just about content coming in, but if you come to the UK to make things, there's lots of places to make them. We now have 7 different production clusters around the UK, located near major cities. Obviously, London, the South East, which Helena will talk about, is overwhelmingly the largest. But when you look at what you can do in Bristol, what you can do in Wales, what you can do in Northern Ireland, what you can do in Scotland or Leeds, or Manchester, there are all people there, there are all local film offices there that we work with, commissions and additional regional funds on top of our tax relief to support you should you decide to try and make something in the UK. And what we've had to do, because of the volume of demand there is on the UK economy, is we've had to work very hard with private investors to build more studio space. And this is just some of the studio space. One of the sponsors of MMFM is Universal. Universal have just opened a 32-acre film and television studio in Elstree, and we have a partnership with them ourselves where their trainees are going on to that, going on to shows. And Fast and Furious 10 is in its final weeks of shooting, and Wicked goes straight into production there, whilst we have Barking and Dagenham that Helen and I I've worked on for 5.5 years. That's got Netflix filling up the existing stages, 12 more stages happening. We've got 16 new stages at Pinewood, 12 at Shepperton, occupied by Amazon and Netflix, and Mission Impossible 6 going into 7 back to back, along with Harry Potter films, all going into this stuff here. And we have 3.5 million new square feet of studio space, either breaking ground and building or in planning, as I speak, to open in the next 3 years. And that has meant that we are creating loads more jobs. And it's our biggest opportunity, our biggest challenge, because we need to harness the talent we've got, but develop more talent. And that's what we're doing, is to invest more in the workforce, because every time you build one of those studios with thousands of square feet of studio space means you need thousands more people to come and work in it. And these are some of the things that Helena will talk about some of this today, but talk about more of it at the panel after this. There's a whole raft of Film London initiatives you can look at, and the British Film Commission raft of initiatives that we're doing with talent, with diverse talent, to develop that talent, to create those opportunities for them to fill those jobs, because we estimate we're going to be creating jobs in the UK of anything from 30 to 50,000 new jobs over the next 3 to 5 years. It could be as many as 75,000, depending on how the demand keeps going. And that means that we have to keep on pushing with all these different initiatives. Animation is a big theme of this event. We have our wonderful animation delegates with us from the UK here, meeting people. And animation is a very big part of the kind of London film and television economy. There's a particular animation strategy. There's a separate animation panel, which our animation consultant Julian will be hosting with our guests that we brought from London, so you can hear more about all of that on that separate panel. And basically, why the regional government, why national government cares about us is that we're one of the few elements in our economy that is actually aiding economic recovery and growth. They're good jobs, they're long-term jobs. It's sustainable income, it's sustainable development, it's sustainable infrastructure. And that's why the Mayor has supported us so much, is because he sees that we're not going to disappear. We are not going to be rendered irrelevant and redundant by automation. We are able to create jobs that change the lives of a generation of people. And that's not even a boast, that's a fact, because those jobs are really there and they're needed now. And this is just a thing about the skills. We've created a new skills program. It's a whole new development for Film London. We are, again, supported by the Mayor. We're working on a very, very big skills and training program, creating a new model in London to train people at speed to occupy those jobs and change the nature of our workforce and bring new entrants in and harness the raw and brilliant diverse talent of London and the UK as a whole. The other thing I should say, and you heard recently from our friends from Spain, and Teresa, our friend from the Spanish Film Commission, well, we're doing all kinds of new partnerships. This was a partnership we announced just a few weeks ago with MMFM sponsors, Universal, that's the Mayor of London, that's Dame Donna Langley from Universal, and that's on the Universal lot where Helen and I were launching this new skills and training partnership with the Sky Elstree studio. And there are lots of those partnerships because we believe that's why we're here. That's why we have a partnership with Miami and with JL and Patty and the fantastic team, is because we don't believe in doing anything unless we do it in partnership. And we're not just about domestic partnerships. We absolutely are passionately committed to international partnerships, sharing, creative exchange, and creative development. And I've mentioned the jobs, but I'll just, that's just a figure. Those are just figures that indicate, the jobs that are being created now and more that are going to go on. The other thing I should say about partnership, and I mentioned Teresa from the Spanish Film Commission, is that despite what you might read about, well, what's our relationship with Europe? Well, we love our friends in the different European countries, the different European territories. We signed a new agreement with Spain, which has already led to some really creative collaborations. We've signed a new agreement with Italy, which we did at the Cannes Film Festival just a few weeks ago. We're signing an agreement with Scandinavia, with Norway. We're having all kinds of productive discussions, because what we've said is, no matter what the politics are above here, that's above my pay grade. I'm not interested in what the politicians say. I'm interested in what the industry wants to do and how the industry wants to work together and collaborate together and partner together. And so we've said to our European friends, let's work together to make sure we can do co-production together. Let's make sure that our creative talent can work together, that they can exchange together, they can move across the territories without fear or obstacle. And that message has become one that I think people really want to hear from the UK, really want to hear from us. And they've welcomed that message, and all kinds of new fertile relationships and partnerships are happening right now. And, you know, one of those partnerships is, of course, with our friends here in Miami. The other thing that, you know, getting towards the end of this is that the other thing I should say, I've mentioned sustainability a couple of times, and I also do mean environmental sustainability. We want to diversify our workforce, but also we want to create an environmentally sustainable industry. We've done a lot of work on sustainability, looking at green energy. We have a certification system in London for greening your productions and being able to recycle. You can get essentially a kite mark on your credits if you do certain things and follow a certain program. And lots of productions have actually, the Crown is one standout example, have done this sustainability program. It's something that, in the same way as we're passionate about diversity and inclusion, we're incredibly passionate about sustainability. And all of that means that we believe we're in a genuinely unique moment of expansion and development for our industry. I've never known anything like it in terms of the opportunities. But that doesn't mean we're complacent, and that doesn't mean we're saying, okay, great, we shut up shop, we're full, we'll just let them get on with it. It means actually we're hungry for more. We're hungry for more partnerships, we're hungry for more work, more opportunities, more ways to grow our own talent, to expose that talent to the international marketplace, to have other international partners come in, to have other creative talent come and work with us in the UK, and for us to bring our talent out here, exactly why our animation colleagues are with us this week. So we really regard all of this as a two-way exchange, a genuine creative partnership for now and for the future, in order we can sustain and develop our own industries, but also to be complementary and sustaining and friends and intelligently collaborate with our partners around the world.
Good show, as always, my friend. Thank you for that. And as you mentioned before, we definitely need to segue to Helena Mackenzie on that note. So, Helena, just tell us, first of all, a little bit more about sort of what you do within Film London to help, you know, to create some of the images that we just saw on these amazing surreal for Film London.
I have to say that I want to start by saying that I really do have one of the best jobs in the world. I'm so lucky. When you look at that show reel and the kind of stuff that we get to work on, we are incredibly lucky, and that's why I've actually been in this job since 2004. It's the longest job I've ever had in my life. And that's the reason why, as you can see the results of there. My job at Film London is to, on the one hand, sort of wear various hats, as actually we all do. In this industry, we don't do just one job. But on the one hand, I'm bringing in productions to come and shoot, and whatever it is that you're making, whether it's animation or whether it's film, TV, whatever it might be, I want you to make it in London. And so that is very much a main driver of my department, which is the inward investment side of things. And if you are going to shoot in London, then I have a fantastic team that can help you logistically to do that and to navigate London, which is obviously a major metropolitan city and a capital, so it's not that easy. You can't just come and do it, you know, there does need an awful lot of prep. So we can help you on the ground there. But on the business development side, we do a lot of other things in terms of events which are more to do with international collaboration, which Adrian was talking about, and all the kind of things that we do to, if we can't fund something, for instance, what we'll do is we'll try and help in other ways to get your productions off the ground. And that works just as much from an international point of view as it does from a sort of local London point of view, from our local producers. We facilitate meetings and we want people to work together. I mean, Adrian said that we are passionate about collaboration and partnerships, and we really are. It's what makes us tick, and we have lots of challenges thrown at us. We like to find a resolution to all of these things, and we like to put people together. And there's nothing we like more than putting people together and seeing that outcome.
No, absolutely, and obviously, and thank you so much, Adrian, for your kind words and the partnership with the MMFM. And I believe the last time you were here at Helena, it was part of a unique sort of initiative, our international co-production competition, pitching across the pond, which was a great experience. So just talk a little bit more about, your experience there and sort of, what are you looking for in terms of a good international partner to come into London and vice versa?
So that particular year, which is 2018, I think. So we do these what they call fam trips. We call them familiarisation trips, where we were bringing a bunch of producers into London every year. And this particular instance was TV drama, and so we instigated the pitch across the pond with you guys, and we were here, and we listened to various pitches over the days that we were here, and we selected 6 producers from Miami to come to London, and we hosted them in London, and we took them to a great event in London which is called Content London, which happens at November-December time every year. Big TV event, and where all the broadcasters go to, all the commissioning editors go to. And it's a great networking event for people to attend, and I do advise you look it up and try and go if you can. And we wanted to put some of these projects that we selected from here to be put in front of some of our London producers and UK producers, not just London. And out of that event and partnership we did, there was one project which absolutely just took off, which is the Call Me Out project, which so there we introduced Stewart at the end
yes.
to Karen, who wrote it, and they've been developing it ever since. So this is an actual example of us coming to things like this, meeting with you guys, recognizing something, and that it has a life, and there's a place for it in the marketplace, and finding the right people to work with. So
absolutely, and obviously a great segue. And I'll go to Stewart, and then I'll jump back to our good friend Drew. So Stewart, obviously, yes, you were sort of brought into our world, into our family via the good offices of Helena and Adrian. So talk a little bit about not only your relationship uniquely now in developing this series, but as a UK producer and working both within the country and with America as well.
Well, that's really simple.
Oh, grab your microphone there.
Well, where can I start? I think, first of all, I think we two on the panel are one of you. We're one of the same. We're producers, and I always when I left, I lived in the north of England. When I left home, my wife said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, it's a kind of these kind of events, I think, are the only opportunities for producers to come together, learn from Helena and Adrian, and brought together by this incredible MMFM, an extraordinary organisation, really a lovely bunch of people who bring us together. And it's simply an opportunity for us to share experience and insights and understanding and explore possibilities. But as been said, also last year it was an opportunity for me to meet these writers and producers who've developed this project, and over the past year have been working with them. Basically, I'm the old guy, done it before, got the T-shirt, think I know everything, don't know anything. We kind of stumble through it all and put together a story. And I think my job in doing that is, and my interest in doing this is, I think that the industry itself is an industry, and it's an industry that it's gone through so many changes that we're all, you know, your generation, the majority of here in this audience, the majority have sort of been born into that new technology. Whereas when I first started, I still think of television as television. My kids don't think of television as television. But I think it's brought together music industry and telecommunications and games, which I've become marginally involved in over the last few years. And what it requires at the core, nothing has changed. At the core of it are to find stories that speak to people, speak to audiences. And at one level, you have to create an industrial machine to do that. I've spent the last 4 or 5 years working on this series for Amazon, Man in High Castle. It took 5 years to produce, probably longer than 5 years. But it started when I was a teenager and read a book by a guy called Philip K. Dick, and in the 1970s in Scotland, it was just a cult figure. Everyone was reading this extraordinary, rather strange, mystical stories, which had some politics, some kind of sense of hope after the Second World War. And it was a story that really grabbed me and my friends. And at the same time as reading that book, I was watching a film, or a series of films about the Vietnam War. So the world was a very different place in many ways, but very similar with the war going on in Ukraine at the moment. And at that point, thinking with friends and colleagues, what can we, as young people in Scotland, do about this? How can we tell stories which reflect our kind of, we weren't in Vietnam, we weren't at war. How can we create something? And you know, from the UK, music came. There was an extraordinary kind of explosion of music, but also filmmaking, documentary filmmaking. Television was an exciting period, and in movies. But I think what has really changed for us as producers is the ability to reach global audiences. And I think that it's both really exciting and challenging that you can, you know, on my phone or on the plane, I can watch a movie or watch a dozen movies. Most of them I don't want to watch, but I'm searching for decent movies. But there is this possibility of watching Korean movies or an Australian movie or a TV series for Latin America. But what I think has kind of caught us all in the headlights is that it's both exciting, but it's an enormous business, and certainly as Adrian and Helena have talked about, it's a hugely important part of our economy. But behind that, it's also really important, and I don't think this is talked about enough, is that it reflects our different cultures and the aspirations of us all, you know, our hopes and dreams. Of my 7 grandchildren, I look at them and think, well, what will the world be like, and what are the stories that I should be telling? So the one thing I wanted to say, I should have sort of opened my opening remarks, is that if we as producers, I hope it gives you hope that you get to my age, I'm still making films, and that I hope it doesn't take as long as it took me to get these films made, you know, about 70 years, that it's possible to get these things made. But finally, just one kind of to focus on this story of Man in High Castle. I just wanted to I made a note to myself to remind me of the horror of this, and I did this on the plane. But I mentioned I got this book in the, must have been the 70s, and read it. And I got to certain point, this is 10 years ago, I thought, I'll try and get the rights. And this is kind of, it's maybe boring to hear this, but it, I think, really shows you how difficult it is to get these things made, whether you're working on, you know, with a studio like Amazon, an enormous, powerful machine. One of them, you know, we're spending more money, I think, on their Netflix than the studios these days. At one end, and but or whether it's a drama or a documentary for a domestic broadcaster, it can take many years to get these things made. So it needs a kind of, for me, you're either see this as a business and you're prepared to spend 5, 10 years of your life to make this one film that will never repay the money you've had to spend to get there, the food you've had to feed and keep your children fed and clothed. But it's that kind of passion to tell these stories, I think, has to be part of this industry, has to be recognized, acknowledged by the industry. There's more and more people working in it. It's churning over more and more money. It's more and more important in our culture, and socially and politically more and more important. And I think comes with that comes responsibility for producers to take stock of their own lives and to look to make stories, not just to get them made, to ape the things that are on television, which I think are largely very poor, really disappointing, and to kind of bring to audiences, not only here in this part of the world, but think of stories which have a universal appeal. So as I say, let me go back to the overview, just to give you a kind of frightening overview. For me, frightening when I look at it myself. I had to do this. I got the rights to the book. I had to raise money to do it. It was expensive. You know, can't tell you how much it was, but it was a lot of money. I had to go to, I went to a sales company. It's a global company. It's a US company, but with a UK base, to co-finance a script. And I'd worked with many writers in the UK, and it's a matter of identifying who would have the value in the market, the credibility, but also the ability to write and understand the core of the story, what the sensibility behind the story. I should say that the story is a what if Germany and Japan won the war. So it's set in the 1960s. The war ended, the Second World War ended in 1945. So it's some years in which Germany and Japan basically occupy America. It's under American rule. And some Americans have, in the story, some Americans have embraced this new world, really embraced it, eagerly embraced it, and others who are fighting against it. So that's the story, a kind of story which asks the reader of the book and asks me in the 1970s, what would I do in that situation? You know, Machiavellian question, do the end justifies the means? If you were to survive and feed your family, do you basically accept a fascist regime? So we thought, what an extraordinary way to take that to an audience today, to ask not only America but the world, what do you do in this situation? So going back to the kind of nuts and bolts, I had to find a writer I thought had this credibility, and he was a Scottish writer, one of the most prominent writers in the UK. And I knew him. We talked about the story. He didn't know the story. He started work on it. We commissioned him with this money from then a television distribution company that's now a production. It's now involved in production. They had to move, distributors having to move into production. But what the tragedy of this, he died before he wrote the script, and the rights holders, the two daughters, were very generous and said, look, we'll just extend but we'd lost the money on the script. He started work on the script. So I had to find another writer. The writer had to be approved, auditioned by the estate, who were very protective of this story. So that took at least 2 years. It was almost 3 years. And we secured the broadcaster, it was the BBC, and we were then planning to do it as a 6-part series. There was at this stage Netflix was just emerging. There was no Amazon. There was Amazon as a retailer, and understand that, retail company. It's not a studio, it doesn't have cinemas, it doesn't have a platform. The retailer at that time didn't have a platform. And we secured the broadcaster. But when we put 2 scripts together, a pilot script and a second episode, we did a budget, ran a preliminary budget, and it was just too expensive for the domestic broadcaster. There was a lot of special effects in it. It was costume drama set in the 1960s in America. And the BBC passed, albeit they funded the script. And the BBC are incredibly generous. They were really helpful and said, look, we're not asking for the money back unless it goes into production. So I was then told, and this is the point, one of the points I want to really stress, the BBC said, you can have this in America. And I said, well, if I take this to America, the story will have a different perspective. Culturally, we'll see it through the eyes of an American finance company, an American company, American writers, or at that time it was a British writer, but nonetheless, and the British writer, who's I think one of the greatest living playwrights in Britain, when he was working on this script, this is the second writer, he had 3 plays running in London simultaneously, one at the National. I mean, true, one for me, what a hero. Anyway, the BBC passed, and I had a call from the studio, an American studio, who had been told the intelligence in with these big projects gets around the world. So I had a call from, it was two people, senior execs on the studio, and they said, look, we know you've got it, we've read the script. How they've got the script, I don't know. They'd read the script. We'll put this into production. So I signed the contract, and the following day after I'd signed the contract, I called from the same two to say, Stewart, we want to change the writer and abandon the script you've written because we want this American perspective. And this man's a friend and a highly revered writer. So it was terribly difficult conversation I had with him. And so they wanted an American writer, and by chance I'd been working. I knew through the you get to this age, you've met lots of different people, and he was a prominent showrunner in the States who'd moved to Europe. Anyway, this guy said I knew he wanted to do it, and Universal funded the script. And within 2 months, the American showrunner had written not the Bible, but a kind of outline of the series and the first episode. And they said, we'll do it. We'll run to a series. They wanted a second, they wanted more work on the Bible. But 3 days later, I had a call from the senior team, the legal department, to say that the two execs had been sacked and that it would be put into turnaround. And the following afternoon, I had a call from, it was then Mr. Amazon, to say, we know we've read the script. These were copyrighted, these were scripts that were all confidential. No one, but somehow Amazon had this. So intelligence flows in this business, and the Amazon said, we want to buy this on the understanding that it's in production. We shoot the pilot in 3 months, which we did. And as we set up the production, it was shot in Canada, or initially it was to be set in Canada. It moved to Seattle for the pilot, then we went back to Canada for a tax break. We put together a room, 7 writers, 3 showrunners were employed, just extraordinary. And we wrote the series, and we delivered the series, and then began writing while it was in production the second season. And in all, we made 40 episodes.
Wow! Congratulations! I mean, that's incredible. Absolutely. It's like the other play, Long Day's Journey into Night, but you made it happen. But that's it just shows the persistence of a producer. And you have another fellow producer to your right, Drew, who is a veteran, very good friend of the MMFM. So Drew, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. So just catch us up a little bit about what you've been up to in the UK. And then also, and this is a relationship that you've started to help us open up with the BAFTA organization and BAFTA North America. And, sort of what the idea is to have that organization not only be such a strong organization within the UK, but now with a footprint in North America as well.
Thank you, and thank you for
Can you grab the
having
mic?
me back. So since we were last here in 2019, I've done another documentary, which was called Ibiza, the Silent Movie, and we shot it in Ibiza. And echoing Stewart's sort of thoughts of things, this was a silent movie and no dialogue. It was a 2,000-year history of Ibiza. It was directed by Julian Temple, famous music director and visionary. And the music was produced, curated, and mixed by Fatboy Slim. And the idea was that we would launch this, and we launched it at the Glastonbury Music Festival, 4,000 people in a field wearing silent disco headsets, dancing around, that it was then going to roll out around the world for live performances. And unfortunately, something got in the way. And so this film that spent, ages being organised and sorted out has sort of stopped. And we're still working on how to restart that. And the take-home message from Stewart is that never give up if you actually believe in what you're doing. And we get all sorts of people come to talk to us about projects, and at the core of it is what's the story and who's the audience.
Right.
Because it's a business ultimately, but you've got to try and get someone out on a Thursday night to go and see your film. So if you're not passionate about it, if it's not a film you want to see, or you're just doing it because you think it's glamorous or whatever, you're not going to get me interested. You're not going to get anyone else interested. When you've got that passion and that ability, there are organisations like Film London, the British Film Commission, and the reason that there is so much production in the UK is primarily about the skill set that Adrian, Helena and the team have brought together, but also understanding what producers need, and they need certainty. Stewart went through 3 layers of different people, different organisations, people being sacked, whatever. In any element of putting a film together, you want as much solid foundation as possible. The UK tax credit is tried and tested, solid, it's explainable, understandable, straightforward, and I think the turnaround time from delivery of your documentation to receiving the money is 6 weeks.
Wow.
Which is the fastest, I think, anywhere in the world.
Yes,
As a
it is.
producer, you're not getting that money up front. You've got to fund that. So you've got to find a bank to fund it. So the less time you have that borrowing, the greater your opportunity. And then you've got an opportunity to continue. Organisations like Film London, they're a later stage organisation. It was the Mayor of London, I think, that set it up. But the British Film Commission's been there forever, the BFI's been there forever, and BAFTA, now 50 years old, is a charitable organisation set up in the industry, but it's about promoting new filmmakers and sort of celebrating the excellence of film. And there are various resources on the BAFTA website that will point you as young filmmakers, old filmmakers coming to the industry for the first time, as to how to do certain things. And it's called BAFTA Guru. And these are tools and elements and resources that are available. As a producer, you want to be able to go to somewhere and have a one-stop conversation. So although it's Film London, Adrian will feed you into Scotland, all sorts of places like that. And certainty is the real key. BAFTA, for a number of years, had BAFTA New York and BAFTA LA. And I joined BAFTA far too many years ago, but as a youngster, and clearly I'm not a youngster anymore, and we're still trying to get people into the organisation. But it was about understanding how we could collaborate with people. BAFTA North America has something that's recently come to fruition. I spent a lot of time working on how to make that work before it got into play. And it was about understanding the differences and then joining and celebrating what's common. And what's common is storytelling, going back to what Stewart said. You want to be able to tell a story. You don't want to make something and then just share it to 6 friends. You want it to be shown around the world. So it starts with the passion. BAFTA North America's initiatives are about reaching out to communities. BAFTA's a whole organisation, reaching out to communities that might not otherwise have opportunities. The organisation has changed its policies about how to become a member. You used to be like an old boys club where you needed someone who was there to propose you, someone to second you, you'd have certain credits in the industry. Now it's about merit. If you've done good stuff, and we're bringing in people at very early ages. There's an Elevate program for young directors, there's writing courses. The resources are out there. And if you don't know about them, whether it's in the UK, Spain, Germany, France, or the US, you're not doing your job properly. Because it's there, we get a lot of people talking to us and saying, well, how do I do this? And you say, well, have you looked at this? Have you looked at that? And it's really about saying, well, you've had a pitch earlier today or a conversation about film financing being compared to building and construction. Think of it, you've got nowhere to live. How do you do that? You've got to have that same sort of energy and enthusiasm for making film. But the title is UK Can Do It, which is, why do you want to do it with the UK? And it's because we're good at what we do. We've done it for a number of years. We're trustworthy. We've got tax credits that work. We can explain them to you. We don't need to give you 16 spreadsheets and 45 minutes and, this is that, whatever it might be. It's clear, definable. You want to go and shoot somewhere, you've got a one-stop shop to walk in. They become the octopus, the network, the spider that goes out. But you've got to know them in the first place, and you've got to be prepared to approach them. And they're only going to listen to you if you've done your homework. And that may be a very small amount, which is, I got your name from, how can you help me, to, this is what I need to do. Right. And so there are so many organizations, so many individuals, so many people passionate about what we do in the industry that they will give you their time. But you'll only have it once. unless you've got something that captures their imagination in the same way. So you have to take your energy and you have to harness it, and then you use it as a business, and the resources are there.
Yeah.
That's probably enough from me.
No, that's a great way to end it. The resources definitely are there, and you guys have done an amazing job. I think we may have time for one or two questions from our audience. So let's see if anyone have a question or two for our UK panel. See a hand right here.
I'm very sorry, I don't know if this is a relevant question, but you were talking about The Man with High Castle. You were talking about how there was a writer. The first one was a playwright that you were a fan of, and then you said they wanted an American writer. Did they actually throw out the first guy's script?
Yeah.
Was it for the better?
It's different. And that, the point that I'm making is that sort of drilling into this, that when you tell these stories to reach an audience around the world, and if it comes from the UK, then, or the producers and the sort of talent, or so-called, around the show, it will reflect our values. And if it comes from America, it will reflect American values. So the Europeans have a slightly different, I would argue, different perspective on history than the Americans. You know, Europe lived through that war, and America didn't. And I find this really interesting as a conundrum for producers. When you're making a show that will reach into Asia, South America, when you make a story, it may have, and these talented people that are running these studios, they're looking for shows that will reach audiences around the world. But you have to accommodate and respect the audiences in these different cultures. And when we were working on this show, that was something that really, it was, I mean, these were, a privilege to be involved in it with, for me, with 7 or 8 writers in a room, 2 or 3 execs from Amazon, and we're talking with we had Japanese advisors, we had novelists and historians advising us in Germany, German history, Japanese history, trying in the way to ensure that there was, when it went to Europe, it was shown in Europe and shown in Japan, the Japanese wouldn't say, oh, there's just an American perspective on this story. It would be a credible story. So it wasn't just the dramatic irony, the jeopardy, and the act structures that you wrestle with. It was, what is this story? Not just about human condition, but how would that culture deal with death? What would the tradition be? The contrast between the Japanese and the German and the American cultures when they face different crises. And these are, I think, just fascinating sort of conundrums, and are rarely discussed in forums like this, where with storytellers, these are the kind of things that the execs and the broadcasters in Europe and the broadcasters platforms here in America they're looking for good stories, but they're looking for an intelligent take on an intelligent perspective, so that you do not have the audiences in other cultures just rejecting them because they're just false. They just feel false.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to end that segment, but absolutely. And again, part of what we're doing at MMFM is to have as much diversity and inclusion, which is actually our next panel coming up.
Slick.
Yeah. But that being said, always a pleasure to chat with our friends from the UK. And the UK can do it. They are doing it. And we're happy that they're doing it with us. Thank you so much.